On the outer edge of the galaxy, where stars looked like quiet lanterns floating in the dark, humans and alien races met not always with friendship, but with silent fear. Space stations became markets, and markets became places where living beings were sold. On one such metal station, smelling of oil and cold air, stood a young human man named Elias Ward. His hands were shaking slightly inside his worn jacket, but his eyes were steady. He had come with a purpose. In a dimly lit auction hall, creatures from many worlds were locked in cages, some angry, some broken, some staring at nothing. Among them was Leora, a silver-skinned alien woman from the peaceful planet Nerithia. Her pale violet eyes were full of silent fire, even though chains wrapped around her wrists. She had once been free, once proud, but now she was just Lot 57 on a digital screen. The auctioneer's voice echoed sharply. Lot 57, healthy female, Nerithian rare. Starting price. Before he could finish, someone shouted a bid. Then another. Voices collided in greed. Leora kept her head high, refusing to cry. She didn't care who bought her. To her, all buyers were the same. Selfish, cruel, using money to claim a life they didn't own. Then came a calm voice. 10,000 credits. The hall fell quiet. Heads turned. Elias stood there, jaw firm, eyes locked on Leora, not like a buyer, but like someone seeing a storm and refusing to step back. The auctioneer smirked and slammed his metal hammer. Sold. Leora's heart froze. She didn't thank him. She didn't look at him. She thought another master, another prison. Elias walked forward and signed papers with trembling hands. The officer handed him a small silver key and a control band. You own her now, the officer said coldly. He hated those words. As the cage door opened with a hiss, Leora stepped out, her steps graceful, but heavy. Chains clinked softly against the floor. She looked at Elias for the first time, eyes filled with pride and pain. You paid for me, she whispered bitterly. Now do what humans do. Command me. Elias didn't answer immediately. He reached out slowly and unlocked her chains. The metal dropped to the ground. I didn't buy you to own you, he said quietly. I bought you to save you. Leora stared confused. Save me? She repeated, almost laughing. There is no saving in this galaxy. Maybe there is, he replied. Come with me. You're free to walk away if you want, but if you stay, I'll protect you. Nobody had ever said such words to her after the invasion of Nerithia. Freedom. Protection. They sounded like forgotten dreams. But could she trust him? Her voice trembled slightly. Why? Why would a human care? Elias looked at her, and there was no greed in his eyes, only quiet sorrow. Because I couldn't save my sister when our colony was attacked. I failed her. I won't fail again. Silence settled between them. Not a cold silence, but a fragile one. Leora didn't move away. She didn't thank him either. But something in her heart, long silent, beat a little louder. Elias turned and said, Come, let's leave this place. She followed. Not because she trusted him, not yet, but because for the first time in a long time, someone had opened a door instead of locking it. The metal corridors of the space station stretched long and cold as Elias walked ahead, and Leora followed behind him silently. She kept a careful distance, her bare feet touching the cold floor, her silver skin faintly reflecting the dim lights. Every step reminded her that she was no longer in chains, yet her heart still felt imprisoned by memories. Elias didn't speak much as they made their way to Docking Bay 12, where his ship, the Starling, waited. It wasn't a big ship nor shiny and new. Its gray body was scratched by time and travel, but it stood firm, like Elias himself, worn but unbroken. He turned slightly. You're safe here, he said softly. Leora's eyes narrowed. Safe? You paid for me. That means you want something. Her voice carried bitterness like a shield. She didn't want kindness. Kindness was dangerous. Kindness could be a trap. Elias stopped walking and faced her. I don't want anything from you. Not work, not obedience, not Anything else? His voice lowered. I just couldn't leave you there. Leora stared into his eyes, searching for lies. She had seen humans who spoke softly, but carried poison in their hearts. But Elias, his eyes didn't shine with hunger or power. They were tired eyes, honest eyes. Still, trust didn't come easy. He stepped aside and pointed toward the ship's entrance. You can come, or you can walk away. I won't stop you. Leora looked down the long corridor behind them. Guards paced in the distance. Cameras blinked from the walls. Freedom outside the ship was only an illusion. Slowly, she walked past him and boarded the Starling. Inside, the ship felt warm, small but peaceful. There were no cages, no chains. Just quiet humming engines and a faint smell of old coffee. Elias led her to a small cabin. You can stay here, rest. There are clothes inside the drawer. If you need anything, just ask. Leora stepped inside slowly. The room had a narrow bed, a small window showing the dark stars, and a folded blanket placed neatly. So simple. Yet it felt more like a home than the cold cells she had lived in. She heard Elias's footsteps fading away. He didn't lock the door. That surprised her more than anything. She sat on the bed, her fingers brushing the soft blanket. No chains, no orders, just silence. And for the first time in many days, silence didn't hurt. But her heart whispered, it won't last. Later, Elias sat alone in the cockpit staring at the stars beyond the glass. His hands shook slightly, not from fear but from the weight of responsibility. Saving her was only the beginning. Protecting her, that would be harder. He whispered to himself, I hope I did the right thing. As the ship drifted through space, Leora couldn't sleep. She stood by the small window of her room, watching the stars blur into silver streaks. Her mind returned to her home planet Nerithia, the lavender skies, the floating gardens, her mother's voice singing in the mornings. All gone. Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. Nerithians didn't cry easily. They kept their pain inside like a hidden flame. A soft knock came on the door. Leora turned sharply. What is it? It's Elias, came his calm voice. I brought food. I thought you might be hungry. She hesitated, then opened the door slightly. He stood there holding a warm tray. Soup, bread, water. Nothing poisoned. Nothing forced. Her voice was low. You don't have to feed me. I know, he said gently. But you're not alone. She didn't thank him. But she didn't close the door either. She took the tray. As he walked away, Leora murmured to herself, Why are you kind to me? Only the stars answered. But deep inside her silent heart, a fragile seed of trust was planted. It was small. It was quiet. But it was there. Days passed quietly on the Starling as it drifted through deep space. There were no chains around Leora's wrists anymore, yet invisible walls stood between her and Elias. They spoke only when needed. Their words were short, careful, like they were both afraid of breaking something delicate in the air. But Elias never treated her like a servant. He never gave her orders, never raised his voice. He cooked simple meals, offered them to her, and then stepped back. Some days she accepted. Some days she stayed in her room and said nothing. He respected that too. Leora often sat alone by the window in her small cabin, watching stars pass by like falling snow. She remembered the laughter of her people, the songs they used to sing under the twin moons of Nerithia. Now there was only silence and the soft hum of engines. Sometimes Elias watched her from a distance, quietly, respectfully. He didn't try to comfort her, didn't try to force smiles. He just made sure she was warm, fed, and safe. And slowly her heart noticed. One evening, a storm of blue lightning flickered outside the ship, electromagnetic waves from a passing nebula. Elias stood in the cockpit, eyebrows furrowed as warning lights flashed red. He spoke into the speaker. Leora, please stay in your room. It's just turbulence. You'll be safe there. Leora didn't reply, but she heard the worry in his voice. For a moment she wanted to ignore him. But something inside told her this was not a command. This was care. She stayed. Suddenly the ship shook violently. Lights flickered. A loud crack echoed from somewhere inside the engine room. Elias cursed under his breath. No, no, no! He grabbed his tool belt and ran. Leora, sensing danger, stepped out of her room. The ship trembled again, throwing her against the wall. She gasped but pushed herself forward. She found Elias in the engine room, smoke rising from a broken pipe, sparks flying. He was working fast, his hands moving. Fur-tangled wires, don't come in, he shouted without turning. It's dangerous. Leora ignored him and stepped closer. Let me help. This isn't safe. I said let me help, she repeated, voice shaking. Elias looked at her. For the first time, her eyes weren't full of anger or distance. They were full of something else, fear. Not for herself, but for him. He gave her a small nod. She held the broken pipe with her bare hands while Elias reconnected wires. Hot steam burned her palms, but she didn't let go. Almost there, he muttered. The ship let out a loud hiss, then stilled. The engines resumed their soft, steady hum. It was over. Leora fell to her knees, breathing heavily. Elias rushed to her side. Your hands, you're hurt. She looked at her burned palms, then at him. It doesn't matter. It does, he said quietly. His voice trembled. You could have died. Leora's throat felt tight. Why do you care so much? She whispered. Elias didn't answer immediately. He wrapped her hands gently with cloth from his jacket. His fingers were careful, almost afraid to cause more pain. Finally, he said, because no one cared when I needed help. Because I promised myself, if I could protect someone, I would. Even if they don't trust me yet. Leora stared at him. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not since her planet fell. Her voice was soft. Thank you. It was just 2 words, but to Elias it sounded like the beginning of hope. Later, Leora sat alone in her room, staring at her bandaged hands. They hurt, but her heart hurt in a different way, soft, warm, confusing. She whispered into the quiet room. Maybe not all humans are the same. Outside the window, stars shone a little brighter. The days that followed were softer, quieter in a different way. The silence between Elias and Leora was no longer sharp like broken glass. It was gentle, like soft snow falling on an empty field. They still didn't speak much, but something had changed. Leora began to sit at the small dining table during meals instead of eating alone in her room. She kept her head low, her words few, but her presence was enough. Elias never forced a conversation. He simply shared his food and a small smile whenever she looked up. One morning she found a small bowl of sweet Nerithian berries placed outside her door. Her hands froze. These fruits only grew on her home planet. She picked one up carefully, her heart trembling. How? She whispered as she carried the bowl to the cockpit. Elias glanced back at her, surprised. Oh, those? I traded for them back at the last station. You mentioned them once in your sleep. I thought they might make you feel better. Leora stared at him. No one had ever listened to her dreams before. No one had cared for such small pieces of her heart. She sat across from him, quietly eating the berries. They tasted like her childhood. Soft, sweet, a little sad. You didn't have to do this, she said softly. I know, Elias replied, but I wanted to. She lowered her eyes to hide the warmth spreading across her cheeks. Later that day, they stood together in the cargo hold. Elias was repairing a broken metal panel. Leora was placing tools beside him without being asked. Their movements, though silent, began to align like 2 melodies slowly learning to harmonize. Elias glanced at her. You're healing well. She looked at her bandaged hands. Yes, the pain is less now. I'm glad, he said. For a moment, neither moved. Then Elias took a deep breath. Can I ask you something? If it's too painful, you don't have to answer. Leora hesitated but nodded. What happened to your planet? Her body stiffened slightly. For a moment she wanted to turn away. But Elias's voice held no cruelty, only quiet understanding. She looked at the floor and began in a low, trembling voice. The Varkans came. They arrived without warning. Burning ships. Metal soldiers. They wanted our crystal mines. We didn't fight. Nerithians are peaceful. We welcomed them. Her breath hitched. They took our cities. My father died on the first day. My mother hid me in the gardens beneath the floating temples, but they found us. They chained us like animals. They sold us like objects. Elias felt his chest tighten. Leora. I watched my world burn, she whispered. I survived, but sometimes I wish I hadn't. A tear fell silent and silver down her cheek. Elias didn't move closer. He didn't touch her. He simply whispered, I'm sorry. No one should go through that. His voice was soft. Not a hero's voice, not powerful or grand. Just human, honest. Leora wiped her tears and gave a small, broken smile. Thank you for listening. He nodded. Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me. That night, Leora couldn't sleep. She walked quietly to the cockpit, where Elias sat watching the stars. He looked surprised to see her. Couldn't sleep? He asked. She shook her head. Can I stay here for a while? He smiled gently. Of course. She sat beside him close enough to feel the warmth of his presence. They didn't speak. They just watched the stars together. After a moment, Leora whispered, Elias, I don't understand you. You saved me. You are kind. And yet you ask for nothing. He looked at her softly. Not everything in this universe has to be taken or owned. Sometimes, it's enough to care. Her heart trembled. For the first time in a long time, Leora felt something warm, something dangerous, something beautiful. She felt safe. Life aboard the Starling slowly became peaceful. The stars no longer felt cold to Leora. The metal walls didn't seem like a cage anymore. She started to help Elias with small tasks, cleaning tools, sorting supplies, even making tea the way Nerithians used to. Elias never forced her. He simply smiled and said, Thank you, every time she helped. His gratitude, gentle and real, made her chest feel warm. One evening after a meal, Elias fell asleep in the cockpit chair while reading navigation charts. Leora walked quietly to him, a soft blanket in her hands. She hesitated, her fingers trembling, then gently placed the blanket over his shoulders. She watched him for a moment. His face looked peaceful when he slept, like a man who carried too many burdens during the day. She whispered almost without sound, Thank you for everything. But peace has a way of breaking when hearts start to trust. Days later, something changed inside Leora. She woke one morning, her head dizzy, her stomach upset. At first she ignored it. Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was food. But then days passed. The sickness stayed. Her heartbeat felt different, deeper. She knew. Fear crawled through her veins. Nerithians were sensitive to life inside them. They could feel the first spark of it. Leora didn't need a doctor to tell her. She was pregnant. And there was only one moment she remembered. The night weeks ago, when loneliness and comfort had woven their way between pain and hope. She had cried in the dark and Elias had held her. They hadn't planned it. It wasn't spoken of again, but now, a new life was growing. She sat on the bed, hands shaking over her stomach. What will he think? What will he do? That evening, Elias found her in the kitchen, pale and quiet. Leora, you look unwell. His voice was full of concern. She stepped back. I'm fine, but Elias moved closer, eyes gentle. You're not. Tell me. Her throat tightened. Words stuck. Tears filled her eyes. She turned away. Elias's voice softened further. Leora, please. You don't have to be afraid of me. She closed her eyes. Her voice broke like thin glass. I'm pregnant. Silence. The hum of the ship felt louder. The world froze. Elias stood still, eyes wide, lips parted, but no words coming out. His heart pounded against his ribs. He whispered, almost breathless, Pregnant? Leora nodded slowly. tears sliding down her cheeks. Before you say anything, I know this changes everything. I understand if you don't want. But Elias didn't let her finish. He stepped forward, gently taking her trembling hands in his. Leora, look at me. She did. His eyes were not angry, not scared, just full of shock, and something deeper. Something warm. He spoke carefully, voice trembling. This is our child? She hesitated, then whispered, Yes. Elias' breath shook. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again, tears glistening. I never planned for this. I never expected it, but I'm not leaving. I will never leave you. Or our child. Leora stared at him surprised. You're not angry? Angry. Elias gave a broken laugh. No, I'm scared. But I'm also grateful. She frowned through her tears. Grateful? Elias cupped her face gently, careful and soft. Because in this cruel galaxy, something beautiful chose to live. Leora's tears fell faster. She leaned into his touch, but then fear crept back in. But society of humans, your people, let them talk, Elias whispered. Let them judge. They didn't save you. They didn't love you. I did. Her breath caught. For the first time since the war, she felt truly held, not as a prisoner, not as a survivor, but as someone cherished. She placed his hand gently over her stomach, and for the first time, they both felt it. Hope. Fragile. Small. But real. Since the moment Elias and Leora accepted the truth growing inside her, the starling felt different. The small ship, once filled with silence and distance, now held soft whispers, gentle smiles, and quiet dreams. Leora's hand often rested gently on her stomach, as if protecting the small life blooming within. Elias would slow the ship's speed over asteroid belts, avoid dangerous routes, and cook warm meals for her even if she said she wasn't hungry. She began to laugh sometimes, soft, shy laughter that disappeared quickly, but Elias cherished every second of it. But peace never stays forever in a universe ruled by greed and fear. One morning, when the Starling stopped at a trading station for fuel and medicine, everything changed. They stepped into the marketplace together. Leora wore a hood to hide her silver skin, but people still stared. Whispers followed them like shadows. Is that an Erythian? Why is she with a human? He bought her, maybe. Elias kept close to her. But the real danger came not from whispers, but from a familiar, cruel voice. Well, if it isn't Elias Ward. Elias stiffened. Captain Rourke approached, broad shoulders, scarred face, and a smirk filled with poison. He was an ex-mercenary turned bounty trader, a man Elias once fought beside, and walked away from. Rourke's eyes slid to Leora. You bought yourself a pretty alien. Heard Nerithians fetch a high price. Elias's jaw tightened. She's not property. Rourke chuckled coldly. Then why's she wearing a control band? Leora's breath caught. The band, though unlocked, still rested around her wrist. Elias stepped in front of her. She wears it by choice. She's free. Rourke leaned closer, voice low and dangerous. Careful, Elias. The Galactic Council doesn't like humans mixing with other species. And if she's carrying your child, his grin turned cruel, they'll take her. And the baby. Leora's heart stopped. Elias's eyes turned dark with anger. Touch her and I'll... Before he could finish, Rourke raised a small device and snapped a photo. A photo of Elias holding Leora's hand. A photo of her slight stomach. A photo that could destroy them. Rourke whispered, one message to the council, and you'll lose everything. Unless, he grinned greedily, you give her to me. Leora grabbed Elias's hand tightly, fear shaking through her body. Elias' voice was soft but deadly. I will never give her up. Rourke's smile faded. Then you'll burn with her. He walked away. Leora trembled. Elias, what do we do? He looked at her with determination. We run. We disappear. Back on the ship, Leora stood silently by the window, tears in her eyes. "It's my fault," she whispered. "If I wasn't here, you'd be safe." Elias turned to her quickly. "No, don't say that. None of this is your fault. They'll hunt us. The Council, the mercenaries. This galaxy hates people like me. And now you too." "I don't care," Elias said firmly. He walked to her, gently placing his hands on her shoulders. "Listen to me. You are not a burden. You are my choice. And this child, our child, is my family." Her voice broke. "Why do you keep choosing me?" He smiled sadly. "Because when I look at you, I don't see what I've lost. I see what I still have." Tears rolled down her cheeks. Elias wiped them gently. "I will protect you, always." She nodded weakly, placing her hand over his. "I trust you." That night, as the starling drifted quietly through the stars, Leora whispered to the life growing inside her. "You are not unwanted," she said softly. "You are not a mistake." Elias stood in the doorway, watching her with soft eyes. "You are loved," she finished. Outside the window, a new star appeared, small, but shining against the darkness. A sign of hope, a sign of danger, a sign of a future they would fight for. The stars outside were calm, but the starling carried a storm inside. Elias pushed the ship to its limits, flying through asteroid fields and radio dead zones to stay hidden from the Galactic Council and Captain Rourke's hunters. His eyes were tired, but his resolve was strong. Leora, now 6 months pregnant, moved slower. Her silver skin glowed faintly, a sign of Nerithian life forming within her. She tried not to show her pain. She didn't want to be a burden, but Elias saw it all. One evening, Elias found her sitting in the engine bay, holding her stomach and breathing unevenly. "Leora?" He rushed forward. "What's wrong?" She gave a weak, shaky smile. "Just tired. The baby is heavy." Elias knelt beside her, his voice soft. "You should be resting. Let me handle things." She placed her hand on his cheek. "You've done so much for me." "For us," Elias pressed his hand over hers, eyes soft. "I'd do it again." 1,000 times, she smiled. But her smile faded when a red alarm flashed across the control panel. "Incoming ship ID, Captain Rourke." Elias's blood ran cold. He rushed to the cockpit. The radar confirmed it. Rourke was here. They found them. Rourke's voice crackled through the communicator. "Elias Ward, you have something that does not belong to you. Surrender the Nerithian girl and your ship, and maybe I'll let you live." Elias looked at Leora, then at her stomach. Rage burned inside him like fire. He spoke calmly into the transmitter. "You're wrong, Rourke." A pause. "She is not something I bought. She's the woman I love. And that child is my family." Leora gasped softly, tears filling her eyes. Rourke laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "Then you'll die with her." Suddenly his ship opened fire. The starling shook violently, lights flickered. The engines screamed. Elias grabbed the controls. "Leora, strap in, hold on." She did, holding her stomach protectively. Asteroids surrounded them, sharp, deadly. Elias swerved between them, engines roaring. Rourke's ship followed like a predator. Another blast hit, sparks flew, smoke filled the air. "Elias," Leora cried. "I'm okay," he shouted. But blood dripped down his forehead. She reached out, wiping it gently even as everything trembled around them. "Please don't die." He looked into her eyes. "Not today." He switched to manual control, breathing hard. His hand shook, but his heart was steady. With a deep breath, he flew the starling straight into the thickest cluster of asteroids. "Elias, what are you doing?" Leora cried. "Hiding," he whispered. "And fighting back." He shut off the ship's thermal signal, turned off the lights. Silence wrapped around them like darkness. Rourke's ship passed by, searching. That was the moment Elias struck. He released a burst of flares from the ship's wings, metal fragments and light, straight into a nearby asteroid. The asteroid exploded. Debris shot across space like deadly spears. Rourke's ship couldn't move in time. It was struck. Engines burned. Metal cracked. Rourke's voice echoed in static, angry, shocked. Then silence. Elias exhaled deeply. They were safe. For now. Hours later, the stars were peaceful again. Leora stood beside Elias in the cockpit. She placed his hand on her stomach. Feel, she whispered. A soft movement. A kick. Elias's eyes widened. Tears filled his eyes. That's our baby. Leora nodded, tears falling gently. Our child. Born not from chains, but from choice. He turned to her. Leora, I love you. She held his face, smiling through tears. And I love you. Silence. Soft. Beautiful. Then Leora whispered with a shy laugh. You paid for me. And now look. I became your wife. Elias laughed quietly, forehead resting against hers. No, I didn't buy you. I found you, and I chose you, she smiled. And I choose you. Now and always. Months later, on a small hidden planet covered in silver forests and quiet lakes, their child was born. A girl, half human, half Nerithian, with silver skin and brown eyes full of stars. They named her Hope, and under a sky full of galaxies, Elias and Leora began their new life, not as prisoner and savior, but as husband, wife, and family.